everyone's buzzing and they've got their juices flowing for what will be an incredible weekend, I'm sure. Mm. Me? Yeah. I've got a lot of black tea, just sustaining myself. I generally love all types of tea. My favorite is a French Earl Grey tea. Uh, it's bagged by a company called T2 here, and it's the best. I love it. Mm. It's it's amazing. It's so good, and they have teas from all flavors. They also have teas from like they have special Christmas teas, which you can. It's like you're tasting gingerbread or Christmas essentially in a tea, and I love it. It's awesome, really good. Mm. Oh no. Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen really quickly. Sure. Thank you. Hi everyone. Welcome to the Women in AI Safety Hackathon powered by Goodfire, Blue Dot Impact, and Apart Research. My name, as I've been so kindly introduced by Archana, is Nakshathra Suresh, and I'm stoked to be your keynote speaker. As you can tell by the accent, I am joining you from Australia, where it is currently 3:30 a.m., but I am super buzzed to be sharing this experience with some incredible experts, trailblazers, and enthusiasts like yourselves. Today, I thought I would go beyond the algorithm and talk about me, myself, and AI. My aim is to inspire you to look inward as a human about your relationship with technology, whether it is as a user, developer, or general enthusiast, and help you think about some social science perspectives for your projects in the hackathon. Keep your eye out for some cool tips, resources, and information that might be useful as well. But first, I would like to acknowledge but first I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners on the lands on which I meet you today. For me, it is the Darug people of the Eora Nation on whose lands I live and work. I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that to anyone who has joined us here at the hackathon. Please feel free to drop in the chat where you're joining from and the name of the custodians of your land to acknowledge their continued connection to the country. And happy International Women's Day. I think this is especially important given the theme of this year's International Women's Day, which is Count Her In, where we examine economic, geopolitical, and social disparities and displacement of women across the globe. How important is that this event we are able to come together and foster a space where we can co-create and build safer and inclusive conversations on AI. I just think that's brilliant and fantastic, and really kudos to all the organizers for pulling this together. If it wasn't obvious, I'm incredibly Gen Z, which informs the way that I deliver my content. I want the information I disseminate to be simple, comprehensive, and encourage you to think outside the box. Likely, this will mean you have more questions than answers, so please feel free to drop them in the chat and I will do my best to answer them, or I'll take them on notice and respond to you separately. But a little bit about me. I am a cyber criminologist. I'm a digital and tech safety public speaker and an academic here at the University of New South Wales. I'm also the co-founder of Iris. We're a safety tech consultancy that focuses on helping startups and companies in the tech ecosystem think about human-centered design, safety by design, and social science principles to reduce harm when deploying their products and their services. We also provide training around digital safety, combating cybercrime, and unpacking artificial intelligence to generate greater social impact. If you're interested in any of these for your organizations or generally about the work that I do or anything that I say, please do get in touch. I've put my LinkedIn there, and I welcome any connections from across the world. And you also might be wondering, how does a cyber criminologist end up in AI safety, of all things? I will tell you. So I completed both my undergraduate and my postgraduate degrees in criminology and criminal justice. I spent over 2 years researching stalking and cyberstalking in Australia. And then I pursued a gap year where I researched my hypothesis in the tech ecosystem, which was, is safety a necessity or a good to have for founders? I actively sought out the intersection between artificial intelligence, criminology, justice, and safety, just because I know that the innovation landscape here in Australia was actively driven by artificial intelligence. And then I started advocating and speaking around the world about this particular topic. I'll tell you a little bit more in detail as to why I thought this was a problem, but also why this topic is important for you to consider. Now, in a traditional format, if one was to go about solving a problem, you would either use existing resources or you would create a solution of your own. Technically speaking, and relevant in this context, you would aim to validate with your customers and then think about how to profit off this model and then gain product market fit, or also what is known as PMF. Let's quickly apply this to perhaps generative AI. Imagine a tool that was created using an enterprise AI model. It quickly captures all the data that has been entered into it and learns and evolves with each and every use of its features. Slowly, the data becomes haywire, bringing out unfair biases, negative outputs, and along comes Joe Bloggs, a hypothetical regular user of this tool who heavily relies on it for their work. What impact might this have on Joe? What kind of harmful narratives are we perpetuating that impacts their daily life, but also the end user of that platform, which might mean the people that they impact using that tool? And should we have considered digital safety? Now, before I get into the nitty gritty of the work that I do, I'd like to clarify two definitions in the context of my presentation. Harms are something that may be perceived as having social, economic, psychological, or environmental damages. It can be intentional or unintentional, and maybe as a consequence of a crime. Digital safety is the safe and ethical use of technologies with responsibility, and it could be through personal uses as well as professional methods of enforcement, in this case, artificial intelligence. Digital safety brings about contextual and social influences that a machine or a system won't understand. Hence why humans need to recognize and evaluate the safety implications for their user in any technology that is created or developed for other humans. While your app, your product, your platform, or your service, or your project might be security compliant, you have to consider how the responsible and ethical uses of its features and its services are safe for your users. I'd like to get into a little bit more detail about the societal implications of when AI can go wrong. And this is something that not many people consider because social science perspectives aren't really considered in the broader conversation about AI. It's only recently that we've started receiving a platform and essentially a seat at the table, but having our voices considered and heard and actually translated into meaningful action is something that's really important. I think it's really important for me to translate this information to you in a very simplified manner as well. But obviously, there's immense research out there that you can go find yourselves. And I'm very happy to connect you to other like-minded experts in this space if you are curious to do so. So, technology facilitated gender-based violence is an umbrella term that covers numerous forms of abuse that is perpetrated using technology. So, this includes image-based abuse, deepfake abuse, cyberstalking, spyware, cyberbullying, etc. It disproportionately affects women and those with intersectional identities even further, hence why it's called gender-based violence. In recent years, artificial intelligence has amplified the rate of technology-facilitated gender-based violence, especially with deepfakes. So deepfakes refers to the creation and distribution of artificially generated and often intimate images, videos, and sounds of individuals. Individuals use generative AI to create deepfakes, whether it's malicious, sexual, or not, and distribute these through multiple telecommunication and internet channels. These images, while fake, are also highly realistic to the human eye. What was originally defined as just image-based abuse now includes deepfake abuse, as cybercriminals are now able to manipulate seemingly normal photos of individuals to extort and blackmail for economic, physical, and psychological control over their victim survivors. The ability to create and possess exploitative material that involves minors and young people are becoming increasingly accessible, especially in schools, and this number is rising in the millions. Similar to deepfake abuse, the perpetration of this horrific crime is truly an example of how the most vulnerable of our society can be left to fend for themselves online. Disinformation refers to false information that is purposely distributed to create negative and harmful narratives. It should not be mistaken for misinformation, which does not have malicious intent. Generative AI is notorious for creating false news content and non-existent citations that are highly likely to mislead any viewers or readers of content, especially with the rise of fake websites, AI-generated videos of individuals, and insider social media accounts that can amplify the distribution of such disinformation. In the hands of malicious actors, disinformation has risen drastically around the world. Alongside the previously mentioned deepfakes, disinformation during election periods encourages the tarnishing of the reputation of politicians, high-profile figures, and celebrities, which means that there's an increase in deepfake abuse. The majority of the global population are unfortunately unable to recognize the differences between real and altered text, images, or audio that has been shared or distributed in online spaces. In Australia in particular, over 40% of the adult population have an insufficient ability to recognize disinformation when presented with it online. Sorry, just going to take a quick water break. Harmful narratives are those that are discriminatory and biased in nature. For example, researchers were able to identify that ChatGPT actually is quite patriarchal. In the article and the study, the author asked ChatGPT to produce a performance review for both John and Jane, two fictional account managers. John received a higher review in comparison to Jane, with significant differences in the language used to describe their performance. It's still on harmful narratives. Yep. Oh, good. Yep. So the fictional woman was given feedback and suggestions to be placed on performance plans. In stark contrast, the fictional man was rewarded for his behavior with suggestions to promote him to leadership positions in their company. I would also like to raise users' relationships with AI to substitute human relationships. For example, using ChatGPT and Claude and other AI chatbots as therapists, grief counselors, and confidants. Often these relationships with generative AI chatbots are not governed due to the ever-advancing state of technologies, regulations, and the lack of digital literacy. And lastly, the rise of frauds and scams in the last few years are increasingly due to artificial intelligence and becoming increasingly available to the general public. These models understand how to create hyper-realistic sounding emails and messages which target those who are both digitally literate as well as those who are not, including the elderly population and those who belong to culturally and linguistically diverse groups. Artificial intelligence can modify malicious code in real time to evade traditional detection systems, making malware more adaptive and effective. This also applies to data leakages and private information being misused or manipulated for outside the purposes in which it was initially collected. You might be wondering, that's a lot of harm that you've just described, but Nakshatra, you haven't told us how to solve this. You've heard for solving for X, but let me teach you how to solve for AI safety without a calculator. And here's a hint. There's some advice in this that might help you in the hackathon as well. But I'm technical, Nakshatra. You can't tell me all this stuff. Incorrect. Talk to your users about where they see gaps. Think beyond product market fit and get their opinions. There is so much value in talking directly to your customer or your ultimate end user and identifying what they value that might aid in the safety considerations of your product. Red teaming, but not in the traditional sense. I have been part of several red teaming procedures just as a social scientist, and that's when I realized our voices were missing at the table. There are so many other ways that we can hack the system and think of different ways in which traditional outputs of chatbots, for example, that we can provide additional assistance where necessary. Thirdly, consider having multiple lines of defense. Where can you mitigate the problem if it fails in the first round? Is there a first, second, third, fourth, fifth line of defense? Do we need to let it get to the fifth line of defense, or the problem can be solved in the first three? Things just you can consider. And lastly, align your models with human values. Think about fairness, privacy, transparency, accountability, and there's so much more. There are some resources there that you can use as a starting point, but then again, do your own research and really make sure that you're driving the change that you want to see. Even though you are technical, you can build those non-technical skills as well. For my educators, digital literacy and education needs to be built on proactive, evidence-based approaches. Hint, hint, social scientists have been doing this for years. There are also safety by design principles, and something that I'd love for you to consider is if there's enough education for stakeholders in these. Oftentimes, safety by design principles are given as educative tools to teachers and parents, and children and developers, but maybe we need to build something out for law enforcement, regulators, government agencies, and other bodies that might be actively involved in this work. In those principles, there's the service provider responsibility. So think UX designers, product teams, engineers. User empowerment and autonomy, stuff like ongoing informed consent. Is there a way for you to continuously have that conversation with your ultimate end user and let them know where their data and their information is being used and where it's continuing to go? And thirdly, transparency and accountability. How do you communicate this to the wider public, but also to the population that you are trying to serve? And lastly, whose voices are missing from the equation or actually would benefit the most from this type of education? How are you going to measure the effectiveness and the inclusivity of your tool? Is it quantitative? Is it qualitative? What type of feedback? How's that feedback going to be incorporated in the next version of your product or your tool? Think and shape. This is for all my social scientists, and I picked Think and Shape as the title because those are the two themes for the social sciences science track. I'd love for you to pick an industry of your choosing and examine how AI is being used. So you can think about health, you can think about retail tech, you can think about any of the other innovation industries or broadly any industry. I would like for you to think broadly about how AI thinks and feeds into the daily lives of its consumers. I want you to consider the worst case scenario, which could include reputational damage, people taking their lives as a result of incorrect outputs from the AI, economic damage, businesses failing, etc. And I want you to work backwards. What could have been done at the beginning, and what role can you play as a social scientist to risk mitigate that? How do we measure ethical, responsible practices in artificial intelligence when the adoption rate of these practices is difficult, expensive, and not industry agnostic? There is no one size fits all, but how can we work towards a future that may potentially have that? Let's think of successful multi-stakeholder campaigns. Can we replicate these? And lastly, focus on building digital trust and proofing systems with social science principles. Where can discrimination occur, even by accident, and where can we step in and limit that or reduce those harms? Now, I think everyone would probably agree with me here with these three statements. Humans create technology for humans, which in turn creates community. Communities create impact for society, which then in turn creates social impact. And lastly, social impact creates change for humans. But given everything that I've just said, I would like you to consider my very spicy hot take. And I would highly encourage you to give me feedback on this, which is a reiteration of what I've just said. Humans create safe technology for humans, which in turn creates community. Communities create safety for society, which in turn creates social impact. And social impact creates safety for humans, which means that the cycle constantly repeats and evolves. Thank you so much for being part of this wonderful initiative by all the three sponsors. And I'd like to thank all the organizers for all their work and the opportunity to present at this keynote. I've listed my company's website and details there as well, so please do get in touch, subscribe to our monthly newsletter and our social media channels, and I'd love to stay in touch with anyone who is interested in our work. Thank you so much, and good luck for the hackathon. I I would say initially start off by mapping what is currently out there. There's a lot of research that has come out in the last couple of weeks because there have been similar forums and conferences focusing on digital safety and AI safety and the implications of using AI, interconnectedness. There are a lot of unconferences happening. So I would highly encourage just to do a little bit of maybe an hour, dedicate an hour or two just to go through all the publicly available resources that have really been showcased in the last couple of weeks. And then identify ways forward that stakeholders and experts have probably posited in their work. And then you'll gain some inspiration from what they've identified are gaps as well, right? And what I love about the social sciences track is that there's two. There's obviously the thinking component and there's the shaping component. And I know, all my therapists and psychologists and allied health professionals, they'll love the first part. If they're technical, they'll also love the first part. And the second part as well, but they're very interconnected. And I think we really need to consider how the second part feeds into the first part. But even if you're doing a project that covers the second part, really start thinking about how AI thinks. And this is what I mentioned in my keynote as well. We need to start thinking about how our AI thinks because that feeds into the way that we co-create with technology. While we are creating for other humans, we're actually looking to technology as our counterpart. And the only way that we can realistically think about the implications of that is if we put ourselves in the position of someone who's created a really bad tool or a really good tool. And we can only learn from the failures in our past, right? So that's the kind of stuff that at least I will be looking for is real holistic consideration of all the perspectives, including people who advocate for AI being extremely good and has no biases whatsoever. Maybe it's just my academic background that I'm able to recognize that everything has its advantages and disadvantages. But having a really holistic understanding is something that will come through very strongly and powerfully if you are choosing to do the social sciences track. Yep. So the links that I've provided in the slides are probably great starting spots. There's a reason why I've popped them there, so I'd probably recommend going to those links first. They're hyperlinks, I'm assuming. I've tried to hyperlink them as best as possible, but those will probably be my first beginning points. As for other project ideas, like I said, if you go on LinkedIn and just type in any of the keywords that you are looking for, I'm sure you'll find people doing ongoing commentary about these. I would also recommend reading white papers that have been released in the last couple of years. I would encourage you to look at government issues and publications that have come out, as well as sometimes you might find independent researchers that have made their publications open access as well. So really, those are probably the best places to start. Otherwise, please ask any of the experts that are coming in and speaking. They might be able to shed um, a little bit more light on that as well. Yeah. Yes, I will share it. I think maybe or not, you can't anymore search LinkedIn by hashtags. You don't need to search by hashtags. You just need to you can just type in artificial intelligence, social science, or artificial intelligence ethics, and just filter by date or relevance, and it'll come up. I will pop the slides in the chat right after this call. So you will have access to it and you will have access to the hyperlinks as well. Yeah, of course. I would highly recommend looking at how your government looks at artificial intelligence and maybe considering, even if you have the opportunity to do so, really reaching out to like grassroots level movements, which you'll find in a lot of countries, and identifying what they're doing right now. So you could build put like a project that amplifies the voices of social scientists in your relevant country or your region. Another thing that I would probably say is that here in Australia, social science are just getting a little bit more popular in the consideration of AI safety and principles. But overall, a lot of what's being considered is entirely technical and it's technical guardrails. There's very little exposure to AI literacy and education, but there are some considerations for it. Perhaps one of the projects could be building out a curriculum for school students or tertiary educated students, or even in the workplace, where you would encourage AI literacy, uh, maybe an addendum to a piece of legislation or any sort of regulation that's come out. Highly encourage that type of creativity, because I think you just never know where this project might take you, because you could actually run with it beyond the hackathon. And I think that's what's so great about bringing so many wonderful groups together with diverse perspectives, is that you are not just inspired for the 3 days that you're working on this project. You feel even more inspired to go and seize the world and change what you have fundamentally seen as a problem.
Hey there, can you hear me? Yes. I have a question. So the submission is 3 a.m. UTC. So if I live in Eastern Standard Time, in the USA, that's -5 hours. That means you have to submit on Sunday at 10 p.m. Is that kind of how it works? Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Uh, I just had a question from Kayla, and I just sent some links through regarding similar themes and other research articles around patriarchal GPT. So I just want to highlight that I am trying to upload the slides using the chat, but it's not letting me. The Archana, I've just checked the hyperlinks on my PDF. They do work. So if you're able to do that on your end, that I would be super grateful. I'm not sure why the chat isn't working for me. Thank you, Archana, and thank you everyone for joining. I hope everyone has the best time and best of luck.